You may have seen it dozens of times without ever thinking about it. A small shape resting beneath a flower bed. A brown figure sitting motionless beside a garden stone. Something so perfectly blended into the landscape that your eyes move right past it. Most people never stop. Most people never look twice. And that is exactly why they miss one of the most interesting signs a garden can offer. But imagine this. You step outside one quiet summer evening. The sun is beginning to disappear behind the trees. The air feels cooler than it did an hour ago. And near the edge of your garden, you notice a toad, sitting completely still. It is not hiding. It is not running away. It is simply there, watching, waiting. And if you knew what that toad was actually telling you about your garden, you might never look at it the same way again. Because the truth is, a toad does not choose a place by accident. It does not wander blindly until it finds a random patch of dirt. Every place where a toad decides to stay must meet certain conditions. There must be moisture. There must be shelter. There must be food. There must be safety. And perhaps most importantly, there must be a healthy environment capable of supporting life. That is why the presence of a toad can reveal something important, something that most homeowners never notice, something that no flower bed, no lawn decoration, and no landscaping project can fake. Today we are going to explore what a toad really sees when it enters your garden, why it chooses certain places and avoids others, what it knows about your soil, what it knows about your water, and why some gardeners secretly celebrate every time they discover a toad living among their plants. Because by the end of this video, you may realize that the quiet little creature sitting beneath your flowers is not just another visitor. It may actually be one of the most honest evaluations your garden has ever received. To understand why, we need to start with something most people never think about: the skin of a toad. At first glance, it does not seem remarkable. It looks rough, dry, almost leathery. But appearances can be misleading. Unlike mammals, birds, and reptiles, amphibians maintain an unusually close connection with the environment around them. Their skin is not simply a protective covering. It is part of how they interact with the world. Water moves through it. Chemicals can move through it. Environmental conditions affect it constantly. In many ways, a toad experiences its surroundings more directly than most animals do. That fact has made amphibians incredibly useful to scientists. For decades, researchers have viewed frogs and toads as biological indicators, living signals that reveal the health of an ecosystem. When pollution increases, amphibians often suffer before many other animals. When water quality declines, amphibians frequently disappear. When harmful chemicals accumulate in the environment, amphibians are usually among the first creatures affected. Their survival depends on conditions that many other animals can tolerate for much longer. That sensitivity makes them valuable messengers, and it creates an interesting possibility. If a toad has chosen your garden as a place to live, what does that suggest about the environment you have created? It does not guarantee perfection. Nature is rarely that simple, but it does suggest something important. It suggests that your garden provides conditions worth staying for, and for a creature that has spent millions of years evolving to detect suitable habitat, that decision means more than most people realize. The story becomes even more interesting when we look beneath the surface. Because healthy gardens are not built from plants alone. What happens underground matters just as much as what happens above it. Beneath every thriving garden exists an invisible world, a world filled with roots, fungi, insects, worms, microorganisms, and countless other forms of life. Most of it goes unnoticed. Yet everything growing above the soil depends on it. Healthy soil supports insects. Insects support predators. Predators create balance, and balance creates stability. The toad, sitting quietly beneath your plants, is connected to that entire chain. It is not simply living in your garden. It is responding to everything happening within it. That means the presence of a toad often reflects something larger. It reflects the ability of your garden to support life at multiple levels. A garden can appear beautiful to human eyes while still functioning poorly as an ecosystem. Perfect lawns can hide lifeless soil. Colorful flower beds can exist in environments that support very little wildlife. But toads are not interested in appearances. They respond to conditions. They respond to opportunities. They respond to survival. That is why experienced gardeners often see them differently. To them, a returning toad is not just another animal. It is evidence. Evidence that the system beneath the surface is working, Evidence that insects are present, evidence that moisture remains available, evidence that the garden still offers something valuable to the creatures that live there. And when night falls, that value becomes even easier to understand. Because while most people sleep, the garden enters a completely different phase of life. The daytime visitors disappear, the shadows deepen, and thousands of small creatures begin to emerge. Slugs leave their hiding places. Mosquitoes become active. Leaf-eating insects move through the darkness. Many pests take advantage of the night because fewer predators are watching. But one predator is still working: the toad. Unlike birds, a toad does not need daylight. Unlike many mammals, it does not need to chase prey over long distances. Instead, it waits, patiently, quietly, almost invisibly. Then, in a fraction of a second, another insect disappears, and then another, and another. Throughout a single night, an adult toad can consume an impressive number of insects. Over weeks and months, those numbers become enormous. What appears to be a quiet animal doing nothing is actually performing one of the most important jobs in the garden. It is helping maintain balance, without sprays, without traps, without chemicals, without disturbing everything else around it. And perhaps the most remarkable part is that most homeowners never notice any of it. They see a small brown animal. Nature sees a predator performing a role that has existed for millions of years. But there is something even bigger happening. Toads are becoming harder to find in many parts of the world. Over the last several decades, scientists have documented significant declines in amphibian populations across multiple continents. Wetlands have disappeared. Natural habitats have been fragmented. Chemical pollution has increased. Water sources have changed. And many amphibian species have struggled as a result. That reality makes the presence of a toad in your garden more meaningful than it first appears. It is not merely an animal passing through. It is evidence that nature still sees value in this place. It is evidence that some of the conditions required for life continue to exist. A toad does not care how expensive your landscaping is. It does not care how perfect your lawn looks from the street. It does not care how many compliments your flower beds receive from neighbors. It only cares about survival. Can it find food here? Can it find shelter here? Can it avoid danger here? Can it continue living here? If the answer is yes, then it stays. That decision may seem simple, but it is based on instincts shaped by millions of years of evolution. In a way, the toad is constantly evaluating your garden, and every day it remains there, it is quietly repeating the same conclusion. This place works. This place supports life. This place is worth staying in. That is why many experienced gardeners treat toads differently. They do not view them as pests. They do not view them as unwanted visitors. They view them as residents, as partners, as members of the ecosystem that help maintain the health of the space around them. Fortunately, helping a toad is usually very simple. You do not need to build a large pond. You do not need expensive equipment. You do not need to transform your yard into a wildlife sanctuary. Sometimes a few small changes make an enormous difference. A broken clay pot placed on its side can become shelter. A pile of leaves can become protection. A few stones arranged to create shaded gaps can become a safe hiding place. A shallow dish of clean water can become an important resource during hot weather. To a human, these things may seem insignificant. To a toad, they can mean the difference between staying and leaving. And perhaps the most important thing you can do is allow part of the garden to remain natural. Not every corner needs to be perfectly tidy. Not every leaf needs to be removed. Not every patch of soil needs to be disturbed. Nature often thrives in places where it is given a little space. The reward for that patience can be remarkable. A healthier ecosystem, more natural pest control, greater biodiversity, and the quiet satisfaction of knowing that your garden supports far more life than you can see at first glance. That brings us back to the original question. What does the toad in your garden really mean? At first, the answer seems obvious. It means there is a toad. Nothing more, nothing less. But as we have seen, the real answer is much deeper. That small amphibian represents healthy soil. It represents available water. It represents insects and microorganisms. It represents food chains functioning correctly. It represents balance. Most importantly, it represents trust. Nature has evaluated your garden. Nature has examined the conditions you created. And in the form of a quiet little toad sitting beneath your plants, Nature has delivered its verdict. This place is alive. That may be why so many lifelong gardeners smile when they discover a toad among their flowers. They understand what it represents. Not perfection, not success in the conventional sense, but something far more meaningful. Proof that life is thriving beyond human attention. Proof that countless invisible processes are functioning exactly as they should. Proof that the natural world still recognizes your garden as a place worth inhabiting. The most important signs in nature are rarely loud. A butterfly landing on a flower, a bird returning to the same nesting site, fireflies appearing on a summer evening, or a toad sitting quietly beneath a plant. None of these moments demand attention, yet all of them tell a story about the quality of the environment around us, a story about whether nature feels welcome, a story about whether life is finding ways to flourish. And perhaps that is why the toad is such a powerful sign, not because it is rare, not because it is beautiful in the traditional sense, but because it tells the truth. It reflects conditions exactly as they are, without exaggeration, without opinion, without appearances, just a simple biological response to the environment around it. So the next time you notice a toad near your garden path, or resting beneath a flower bed, or sitting motionless beside your porch at sunset, take a moment before walking past. Look a little closer, because you may be looking at one of the most honest indicators your garden can provide, a sign that many people miss, a sign that your soil is supporting life, a sign that your ecosystem is functioning, a sign that nature has examined your garden and chosen to stay. Have you ever discovered a toad living in your garden? Did it appear after a summer rain, or has it returned to the same corner year after year? Tell me about it in the comments. I read every single one, and if today is the day a small, brown toad became one of the most meaningful creatures in your garden, then perhaps something has changed in the way you see the natural world around you. That change is exactly why this community exists, and I will see you in the next video.